Hey guys, tonight we time travel to ancient Egypt, but not as a pharaoh or a high priest, or even someone fancy with gold eyeliner and a personal fan waver. No, you wake up as an ordinary person, like 90% of the population, someone who has to survive the heat, the dust, the divine bureaucracy, and whatever terrifying bug just crawled across your linen sleeping mat. And I'm just going to... You probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop your location and local time in the comments too. It's always fun to see where and when you're tuning in from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake up to the sound of a goat chewing something suspiciously close to your ear. It's still dark outside, barely a pink glow on the horizon, but your day has already begun. The desert air is cool now, but you know that won't last. In just a couple of hours it'll feel like someone is holding a magnifying glass over your entire village. Welcome to ancient Egypt, specifically sometime around 1350 BCE, and you're about to have a very, very long day. You sit up on your woven reed mat, brushing bits of straw off your tunic. You slept in your clothes because, well, everyone does. Changing is a luxury, and besides, laundry involves carrying everything down to the Nile, beating it with soap water and hoping crocodiles aren't feeling bitey today. Your linen is stiff, probably still crusty with yesterday's sweat and the faint smell of river mud. It itches in that way that only ancient unwashed linen can. Your house is made of mud brick, sun-baked and crumbling at the corners. There are no windows, just small holes carved into the upper walls to let in a bit of air and a lot of bugs. No doors either, just a reed curtain that barely keeps out stray dogs or, heaven forbid, a curious jackal. You share your space with your spouse, your children, maybe your elderly parents, and at least 2 chickens who decided long ago that they live here now too. There's no mattress, no pillow, just a headrest, an arched stone cradle that supposedly keeps your neck aligned while you sleep, but mostly just gives you weird dreams and a crick in your spine. You stretch, yawn, and accidentally inhale a mosquito. Classic. First order of business, relieving yourself. But there's no bathroom. There might be a small clay pot in the corner, but if you're lucky you've got an outhouse. A hole dug out back, covered with a thin reed mat to keep the smells down. It doesn't work. Everything smells. You hold your breath, do what needs doing, and make a mental note not to step barefoot out here after dark. Then it's breakfast time, which is a generous term for whatever you didn't eat last night. Usually that means some cold porridge made from barley or emmer wheat, hardened into something that could chip a tooth. If there's beer left, you drink that too. Yes, beer for breakfast. In ancient Egypt, that's not weird, it's normal. It's low alcohol, cloudy, and filled with bits of half-ground grain, like cereal and booze all in one. Yum. If you're lucky, your spouse caught a fish yesterday, and you have a sliver of it smoked over last night's fire. But don't get your hopes up. Mostly it's just the porridge. And beer. Again. As you chew, slowly, trying not to gag on the husks, you think about your to-do list. Fetch water, go to the field, dodge the scribe gaming grain taxes, get to repair the fence that the neighbour's goat trampled again. Avoid the local priest who keeps saying your daughter needs to marry someone from his family because the gods said so. And hope you don't stub your toe on another cursed shard of pottery someone left lying around like it's a Lego. Outside, the village is waking up. Roosters crow, children cry. The air is already buzzing with flies and the sun is climbing like a smug overseer, ready to whip the whole land into a dry, sweating mess. You head out to the Nile, carrying your clay jars. It's a short walk, but every step is a negotiation with uneven stones, biting ants, and the overwhelming urge to never walk again. The Nile is the lifeblood of Egypt. Without it, there's no farming, no trade, no life. But it's also home to crocodiles the size of canoes and hippos with anger issues. So many parasites. You fill your jar carefully, trying not to disturb the water too much, because if anything brushes against your ankle, you're going to scream, like a deity possessed. Back at home, your kids are already arguing. You send them to gather firewood, which is code for go bother someone else. Then it's time to prepare the day's meal. Bread. You pound grain between 2 stones, working up a sweat. You know that this flour is gritty. Why? Because the grinding stones shed tiny bits of quartz and sand into it. Ancient Egyptian bread was basically edible sandpaper. No wonder everyone's teeth looked like worn-down limestone. Fun fact, archaeologists say that even the rich had dental problems from this, though some scholars still debate just how widespread tooth loss was among different classes. Oh, and here's a delightful tidbit. Toothpicks were common, made of bronze or wood. So were primitive toothbrushes. And toothpaste? A mix of burnt eggshells, ash, and sometimes, wait for it, powdered ox hooves. Tastes like ret. You chew slowly, staring out at the rising heat haze, and wonder if this is all there is. No Instagram, no espresso, no comfy chair. Just barley bread, sand in your shoes, and the distinct possibility of dying from a stubbed toe that gets infected. The only entertainment is gossip, music played on reed flutes, and the occasional travelling magician who might charge a hen to make a coin disappear, or curse your neighbour, depending on the mood. You wipe your brow with the hem of your tunic, which just makes your face dustier. The sun's not even high yet, and you're already sweating like a roasted duck at a festival. You think about skipping work, just one day. But then you remember, skipping a day means losing your grain allowance, and if the scribe notices, well, let's just say nobody wants to be accused of shirking royal duty. Some scholars believe local officials had more power than we give them credit for, especially those pesky scribes who recorded everything and tattled like ancient Karens with inkpots. You sigh and pick up your tools. There's no running from this life. It's baked into the mud walls, stitched into the linen, floating in the air with the dust and the incense. You live by the rhythm of the river, the sun, and the whip-crack voice of whatever overseer is shouting your name today. Still, there's a strange beauty to it all. The smell of earth when the Nile floods, the golden light at dusk, the way the palm trees rustle when the breeze sneaks in from the desert. And for a brief moment, as you squint at the horizon, you think maybe, just maybe, you'll survive the day. And then you trip over a sleeping goat. Your feet are dusty, your hair is stiff with sweat, and your stomach is already thinking about lunch, even though it's barely past sunrise. But before you can dream of anything edible, nature calls again. And in ancient Egypt, that's never convenient. You shuffle outside, already bracing yourself for the worst. The family toilet is a shallow pit, surrounded by reed fencing for a semblance of privacy, though the goats don't care, and neither do the neighbours' kids, who find every reason to run past and giggle. There's a flat stone nearby, just don't look down for too long. There's no toilet paper, obviously. You use smooth pebbles, or a wad of linen if you're fancy and don't mind doing laundry twice in 1 week. And washing your hands afterward? That's a luxury. You rinse with water from the Nile, which you now remember was probably where someone else just relieved themselves. Hygiene in ancient Egypt is complicated. They cared, so they scrubbed, perfumed, and painted themselves, often while standing ankle-deep in water that could kill a hippo. Toothbrushing is next. Yes, you brush your teeth. Sort of. You pick up a frayed stick, chew the end until it's soft and fibrous, and scrub at your molars with a paste made from burnt eggshells, crushed rock salt, and powdered ox hooves. Sometimes they added myrrh to freshen breath. But you're out of myrrh today. Again. That's the third time this month. Someone's been sneaking it for rituals. You make a note to glare at your cousin later. Now, here's the kicker. Your breath probably still smells like sour beer and mouldy bread. Most Egyptians, even the rich, had terrible dental health. Archaeologists have examined countless mummies with worn-down teeth, abscesses, and even full-on jaw infections. Grinding your flour with stone tools tends to put, well, stone into your bread. That constant chewing of gritty loves left your teeth like cracked river rocks. One medical papyrus even advised rubbing ground celery seeds into a cavity, because who needs Novocaine when you've got salad spice? Some scholars argue this is why so many statues of pharaohs show them with tight-lipped expressions. Was it stoicism, or just a desperate attempt to hide the dental? And if things get worse, you can visit a temple physician. He'll chant to the gods, smear a concoction of honey, natron, and maybe lizard fat onto your gums, and tell you to rest. You'll leave with your pain, and possibly a mild curse, still intact. But you don't have time for that now. You've got to sweep the floor, Toss water onto the courtyard to keep the dust down, and hope none of the family's clay jars have been stolen. Again, one of them already has a crack, and no. You try to focus on the chores, but the smell of something ripe pulls your attention. It's your neighbour's outhouse, a little too close to your wall. You wave your hand, gag a little, and step away. This is what passes for normal. For now. You return indoors to prepare a poultice for your son's scraped knee. You mash up garlic, honey, and some fresh goose fat and smear it on a linen strip. Sounds disgusting? It kind of is. But here's the wild part. It worked. Ancient Egyptian medicine, while filled with oddities like the dung later, don't worry, also used effective treatments like raw honey, which is antimicrobial. Garlic too is known to help with infection. The combination smells like death warmed over, but your son doesn't complain. You plop down on a wooden stool, no cushion of course, and take a moment to rest. It doesn't last long. A knock at the reed curtain. It's your cousin, pale and sheepish, holding his jaw. His breath hits you before he does. Bee sting, he mumbles through swollen lips. That's an abscess, you reply. He shrugs. The priest says it's the goddess Circuit punishing me. You hand him a lump of natron and tell him to chew it and keep praying. What else can you do? You walk outside and pause by the public wash basin in the square. Women and children are lined up, splashing water on their hands, faces, arms. It's a social ritual as much as a sanitary one. You join them, washing your arms and neck, careful to not soak your clothes. Water's precious, even near the Nile, and carrying it is backbreaking work. As you scrub, an old woman next to you complains about the flies, the heat, and the youth today not knowing how to sweep properly. She also mentions that her niece lost 3 teeth last week because she skipped her offerings. You nod solemnly. In truth, it was probably that stone-filled bread again. It's all connected: hygiene, health, and the gods. Cleanliness wasn't just about keeping dirt off, it was about moral purity, divine favour, and cosmic order. You don't clean up to avoid germs, you do it to avoid chaos, to show respect to Mahat, to principle of balance and truth. You don't want to be smited for dirty fingernails. This is why people bathe daily in the Nile, wear makeup made of lead and galenay, and carry perfumed cones of fat on their heads that melt slowly throughout ceremonies. That's not a joke. Rich Egyptians really did this. Sort of ancient deodorant candles for your scalp. Some scholars debate if these cones were symbolic or literal, but either way the aesthetic is unforgettable. You return home and light some incense to chase away bad spirits, or at least the smell of goat. The kids are fighting over a lump of dried fig again. You settle them with a warning. Keep this up and the goddess Sekhmet will turn your tongues to snakes. It's not in any official text, but hey, parenting is mostly improvisation. You grab a bowl of cooling water and sit in the shade. The flies are back, landing on your arms, your food, your face. You wave them away, annoyed. Then you remember, the ancient Egyptians believed flies were sacred to some gods. In fact, high-ranking soldiers were sometimes awarded golden fly amulets as medals of bravery. Imagine that. You try not to scream. Your spouse joins you with a bundle of fresh herbs, fragrant, earthy, slightly wilted from the sun. Basil, mint, maybe a little papyrus root. These aren't just for flavour. They're tools of health. Warding off spirits, easing digestion, calming the nerves. You place a few leaves behind your ears, something your grandmother swore by. By now the morning is slipping away. The sun is crueler. Your clothes cling to your back. You haven't even made it to the fields yet, but your breath is somewhat fresh. Your kids are alive, and your teeth haven't cracked. That's a win. You stretch again and glance at the temple across the square. A priest is chanting. Someone is burning resin. A woman is weeping quietly at the gate. It's life, every day, held together by rituals, sweat, and the hope that maybe, just maybe, you won't be judged too harshly by your gods or your dentist. You close your eyes, just until the next goat scream. You open your eyes again and, for a moment, wish you hadn't. Because today, like most days in ancient Egypt, you have to work, and not some light desk job with ergonomic chairs and coffee breaks. No, You're expected to contribute to the survival of your household, your village, and, technically, the divine cosmic order of the entire universe. No pressure. You sigh, brush the dust from your knees, and prepare for another day of blistering heat, aching joints, and people shouting orders. There are no weekends, no sick days, not even a whispered concept of retirement. You work until your bones say no, and even then, someone might prop you up and hand you a basket anyway. So, what's your job? Well, odds are, you're either a farmer, a farm one, or a semi-skilled tradesperson. Maybe you help bake bread, weave linen, or ferry water jars from one house to another until your arms go numb. You might have thought pyramid building was just a thing from thousands of years earlier, but guess what? Massive building projects are still underway. Pharaohs have temples to build, monuments to commission, and egos to immortalize in stone. If you're strong and unlucky, you've been roped into a corvée crew, a rotating workforce that's been forced, to go haul limestone under the sun alongside hundreds of other tired, sweaty, barefoot men. You have a choice. Obey the overseer, or get whipped. Not metaphorically, literally. Contrary to popular belief, most of these big projects weren't built by slaves. Many labourers were Egyptian citizens fulfilling their seasonal tax obligations. Instead of paying in coins, because coins don't exist yet, you pay with your sweat. Still, some scholars argue over the full makeup of the labour force. Were they foreign captives among them? Probably. Were they technically slaves? Depends on which. You march toward your assigned job site, passing a group of boys collecting bricks made from mud and straw, stacked neatly and drying in the sun. One of them waves at you. You nod back, trying not to trip over the uneven stones again. You remember your cousin once broke his ankle doing just that. He spent weeks limping around on a splint made from reeds and prayer. You pass by a group of women spinning flax, their fingers nimble, voices humming a song older than any monument around you. Their work is just as backbreaking, feeding families, managing households, sometimes running small shops from doorways. People tend to romanticize ancient Egypt as a paradise of gold and wisdom, but in truth, every day is just hard. Still, there's a hierarchy even among suffering. At the very top are the nobles and priests, who spend their days in elaborate robes, reciting hymns, supervising land distribution, or advising the pharaoh. Somewhere beneath them are the scribes. Ah, the scribes. You spot one now, seated on a shaded platform near the market square. He's young, smug, and very clean. Probably hasn't carried a bucket in his life. He's holding a reed pen, scratching out rows of symbols on papyrus, tracking grain rations, tax dues, and probably whether or not you showed up to work last month. Scribes are among the most powerful people in Egypt, not because they fight or build or lead armies. If your name goes on the wrong list, you might not eat next week. You quietly curse his sandals and keep walking. Some historians debate how accurate the yearly flood forecasts were. The Egyptians built nilometers, stone columns carved with measuring lines to monitor the water level. If the water reached the right line, everyone breathed easy. If not, panic set in. And unlike today, you couldn't just Google the weather. You had to rely on priests, downloaders, and whatever the IBs down the street was doing. If he squawked weirdly, that might mean high flood. Or just indigestion. You reach the village again, stepping aside as a man leads two donkeys stacked with wet reeds, their hooves squelching in the path. He gives you a nod, and you nod back, pretending your shoulder isn't screaming from the weight of the jar. Back at home, the water goes into the communal basin for washing. Not drinking. No. Drinking Nile water raw is a gamble. You'd filter it, maybe boil it, or mix it with beer to kill the nasties. Still, your uncle's been sick for weeks, and the healer swears it's river worms. You don't ask for details. You like sleeping at night. After breakfast, barley again if you're wondering. You're told to join the irrigation crew. It's flood season, which means you've got to help guide the precious water to your section of the field. You grab a shovel-like tool and make your way out. It's a little-known fact that the ancient Egyptians were masters of irrigation. Canals, dikes, basins. They built entire systems by hand to trap and direct water. And they did it in linen skirts, mind you. Makes your gym shorts look lazy. You reach the canal just in time to be told you're on bucket duty. Great. Another day of scooping muddy water and tossing it into furrows while trying not to fall in. One of your neighbours already lost a sandal. Everyone says it's gone forever. That the river claimed it. You secretly hope it finds its way to some ancient fish who can finally stop sliding on the muddy bottom. Hours pass. Your arms burn. The sun climbs higher. A child splashes nearby and earns a scolding from his mother. You'll stir up the demons. She's half joking. Maybe. Ancient Egyptians believed in dozens of water spirits, some helpful, others malicious. The Nile wasn't just a river. It was a sacred living thing. And that meant you didn't take liberties. Even fishermen, brave as they were, often offered prayers before casting nets. They believed the river had moods. One day it feeds you, the next it swallows your boat. That unpredictability bred both awe and fear. And when people disappeared near the water, well, let's just say there's a reason temple rituals often involved appeasing sober. After lunch, yes, still barley. You're tasked with helping your neighbour ferry goods across a small tributary. You're balancing on a rickety boat made of papyrus reeds, stacked with clay jars and hoping the ropes hold. The water laps at your toes. A dragonfly zips past your ear. You focus on the horizon and try not to think about leeches. It's during this trip that you hear the gossip. Apparently a scribe fell into the water yesterday. No one knows how. Maybe he slipped. Maybe someone helped him slip. All that's known is that his scrolls were ruined and his sandals floated downstream. You try not to laugh, but you do. Just a little. By the time you make it back home, you're soaked, sore, and rethinking every nice thing you've ever said about rivers. But the jars are delivered and you've earned a small piece of roasted fish as a reward. You sit near the entrance of your house, watching the golden hue of evening fall across the landscape. The Nile glows like melted amber, peaceful now, like it didn't try to murder you earlier. Your daughter plays with a doll made from papyrus stems. Your spouse lights a lamp. Somewhere in the distance, a temple drum echoes softly. You think about how the Nile is both everything and too much. It gives life, it gives death, it gives foot infections. But without it, you wouldn't be here at all. You'd be dust on the wind, a forgotten bone in the sand. And as the sun dips below the horizon, the breeze cools and the frogs begin to sing, you feel something you didn't expect. Even if it smells like wet goat most of the time. Your stomach grumbles. Loudly. Again. At this point, you're pretty sure even the goats have noticed. And while you'd love to sit down to a steaming plate of roast lamb, some buttery garlic flatbread and a chilled fruit smoothie, you are, tragically, still in ancient Egypt. Which means it's time to prepare your next exciting meal. Barley, with a surprise twist of more barley. You trudge into the house and glance at the family's grain storage jar, which stands like a clay sentinel in the corner. It's nearly half empty, its contents dry and clumped with yesterday's humidity. You run your fingers through the coarse grains, checking for weevils. You find 3. That's average. They're protein if you squint hard enough. You scoop out a few handfuls, grinding them by hand on the same worn quern stone you've used since you could hold a pestle. The stone's grooves match your knuckles at this point. As you crush the grains, a fine dust lifts into the air, settling in your nose and throat. You cough, then sneeze, then cough again. Somewhere someone claims the gods are punishing you for forgetting last week's incense offering. You think it might just be the mold. Yes, mold. Because while bread might be the staff of life, it's also a magnet for spores, especially when your bakery is a sun-baked corner of your mud brick home, with the ventilation power of a sealed tomb. You remember when your uncle got food poisoning from a loaf that smelled a bit too sour? He insisted it was just aged. 3 days later, he was offering prayers to every healing god he could name between vomiting fits. Even Imhotep, who technically wasn't even a god yet. Your dough today is simple. Crushed barley, a splash of water, a pinch of salt, if you have it, and a few chopped herbs to make you think it tastes different from yesterday. You form the mix into rough patties and slap them onto the hot baking stone near the fire. They hiss and bubble as they cook, filling the room with a smoky, grainy smell that somehow reminds you of sandal. While those cook, you peel a few dried dates. One of them is suspiciously crunchy. A bug? A seed? A mystery? You don't ask questions anymore. You just chew and carry on. Let's be real. Meals in ancient Egypt are a spectrum of barely enough to slightly more than you wanted. If you're a peasant, most of your diet revolves around barley, emmer wheat, onions, lentils, leeks, and the occasional lucky snag of dried fish or bird meat. There's no cheese, no sugar, no coffee, no regrets, except maybe for that suspicious date. Still, Egyptians were creative. You've seen neighbours sweeten bread with honey or date paste, spice stews with coriander, and ferment leftovers into strange but oddly tasty sauces. There's even a kind of porridge that's thick, sour, and so dense it could be used as a building material. You eat it when you're desperate. So usually, you finally sit down on the dusty floor, cross-legged, tearing into a steaming hot barley cake and dipping it into a bowl of mashed chickpeas and garlic. You close your eyes, chew slowly, and try to imagine it's hummus. It's not. It's vaguely edible paste, but at least it's warm. You're joined by your family, who sit in a half circle, scooping from shared bowls. There's laughter, arguing, and a few sticky fingers. A toddler drops a fig. The goat immediately claims it. Your spouse brings out the treat, an old clay jar with dried lotus seeds, a rare snack. You crack one open. It's slightly bitter, incredibly chewy, and oddly satisfying. You take two more. Let's pause here to admire the ingenuity. Ancient Egyptians didn't have preservatives, fridges, or even a working concept of refrigeration, but they still found ways to dry, salt, and store food for months. Grains were kept in sealed jars, fish was dried or salted, fruit was hung in shaded corners, and beer? Beer was brewed constantly, consumed quickly, and was often safer to drink than water. In fact, beer was so common that even children drank it. Though scholars still argue about its exact alcohol content, it was likely more like a chunky liquid bread smoothie than a modern lager. It filled your belly, it soothed the heat, and it gave you a mild buzz that made forgetting your sunburn slightly easier. Speaking of sunburn, remember the ancient sunscreen we hinted at earlier? Brace yourself. Some Egyptians used a mixture of crocodile dung and sour milk as a kind of UV protection. It was spread on the skin to block out the sun, and possibly everyone else within a 5-foot radius. Scholars still debate whether this was truly medicinal or more ritualistic, but either way, you'll never look at sunscreen the same again. You finish your meal and lean back, watching as your neighbour carries out a tray of preserved duck legs to sell at the square. You've tasted them once. Tough, salty, with a texture somewhere between jerky and regret. But if you're lucky, and the gods are feeling generous, you might trade a few fish tomorrow for Not everyone in Egypt is suffering this much. If you were elite, say a noble or a high priest, you'd be feasting on roast goose, honey cakes, fresh grapes, and wine imported from the delta. Your dishes would be painted with lotus flowers and your servants would fan you while you picked at roasted catfish. Instead, you lick your fingers and hope nobody notices you just ate your portion and your child's leftovers. Dessert? You dream of it, but in reality it's more dates. Always dates. Occasionally figs if the season's been good. You once heard a rumour that in the palace kitchens cooks made a sweet paste of honey, nuts and crushed petals. You've never seen it. You're not even sure if it's real. Some scholars think it might be myth. But every time you taste something remotely sweet, your brain tries to convince you it's that dessert. Ancient Egypt's version of gaslighting. After dinner, you clean the bowls with Nile water and sand. Yes, sand. Because soap isn't really a thing. You scrub hard, rinse twice, and hope the next meal doesn't taste like gravel. Sometimes it does. But you've learned not to notice. Your stomach is full, your muscles are tired. You curl up on your mat again, wrapped in scratchy linen and layered in sweat. A breeze stirs the curtain. Somewhere outside, a cat yowls, probably knocking over a jar again. You think back to the bread, the beer, the sticky fingers, and the faint sting of hot spice on your tongue. For all its flaws, this meal was good. Maybe even a little comforting. Even if the barley still tastes like regret. You stretch your arms above your head, linen tunic rumpled and sticking to your skin like an overcooked barley cake. The sun isn't even fully up and you're already regretting every fashion decision you've ever made. Not that you really get to make any. In ancient Egypt, your wardrobe is less about style and more about survival. And also maybe about appeasing a god. or avoiding judgmental glances from temple guards who think your heme is way too wrinkled for Ra's approval. Your outfit today, like yesterday and probably tomorrow, is made from linen. Always linen. The flax plant is harvested, dried, soaked, pounded, and then spun into thread thinner than your patience. It's cool, it breathes in the heat, and it frays at the edges like your nerves during tax season. You tie your sash tighter around your waist and fumble with the fold in your robe that always wants to sit crooked. Fashion isn't optional, it's cultural. The way you dress says everything about your class, your status, and your sense of cleanliness. And make no mistake, people are watching. You step outside into the brightening morning, the light catching on the fine dust clinging to your heme. A woman passing by narrows her eyes at your tunic like it personally insulted her grandmother. You make a note to rewash it, or more likely just roll in the sand and call it a new look. Clothing in Egypt is simple but structured. For men, it's typically a wraparound kilt called a shendet, sometimes paired with a shoulder strap if you're feeling formal or need to carry tools. For women, it's usually a long tube dress with wide straps and, if you're lucky, decorative beads. And if you're not, hope you enjoy the minimalist aesthetic of beige sack. Shoes? Optional. Pasti go barefoot, and if you do have sandals, they're made of woven papyrus or leather. If you're lucky enough to own leather, which is kind of the ancient equivalent of wearing Gucci loafers to a mud festival. You walk toward the market, passing a couple of scribes dressed in crisp white linen that looks like it's never seen a drop of sweat in its life. You resist the urge to trip them with your sandal. Probably not worth the trouble. One of them is wearing eyeliner, thick, dark lines extending beyond the eyes in the shape of falcon wings. You try not to stare, but it's hard to ignore. Because yes, makeup is everywhere, and it's not just a vanity thing. Everyone, men, women, even some children, wears kohl, a black cosmetic made from powdered galena, a lead-based mineral. Yum. It's applied with a stick or reed and believed to protect the eyes from the sun's glare, repel flies, and you catch your reflection in a polished copper mirror set up at a vendor's stall. Your car is slightly smudged, your hair's a mess, and your face has a pattern of dust spots that make you look like a half-baked statue. Excellent. You wipe your cheeks and reapply a little of the soot and oil paste from a shell you carry tied to your belt. Hair in Egypt is an art form, by the way. Most people shave their heads to avoid lice and keep cool, but wigs are the fashion accessory of the elite. Some are made from human hair, others from plant fibers, braided, beaded, perfumed. If you've ever seen a statue of a dignified Egyptian with perfect shoulder-length hair, just know it's probably a wig, and it probably cost more than your house. You, however, are lucky to have a cloth head wrap to keep the sun from boiling your scalp like an egg. There's a tear near the back from when a goat bit it last week. You wear it anyway. As you enter the market square, you take in the dazzling variety of styles around you. Brightly dyed linen in shades of ochre, crimson, and indigo for the wealthy. Beaded collars that look like flattened rainbows. Sandal straps decorated with tiny bits of ivory or glazed faience. Even children have their own accessories. Side note, in Egypt, kids, especially boys, are often shaved bald except for one long lock of hair on the side of their head. It's symbolic, possibly religious, and definitely aerodynamic. You browse through a stall selling head cones. Yes, head cones. Those waxy, perfumed lumps shaped like scoops of butter that people wear on their heads during parties and ceremonies. As the cone melts, it releases perfume. Some scholars believe they were symbolic and never really worn. Others insist they were very real, very fragrant, and very sticky. While sniffing a cone that smells vaguely of cinnamon and wet sheep, you overhear a conversation between two traders. She wore brown linen to the festival. No. Yes, brown. You recoil in shared horror. In a world where cleanliness is literally next to godliness, showing up in unbleached, unstarched linen is like showing up to a royal wedding in flip-flops and a potato sack. Egyptians placed extreme importance on appearances, especially when it came to spiritual purity. You had to be clean, pressed, and preferably glowing like a statue of Hathor dipped in moonlight. And it wasn't just for show. Clothing had spiritual significance. Ceremonial robes, priestly collars, and even jewelry were designed not just for beauty, but to align you with the divine. Wearing the wrong thing during a ritual might offend a god. Wearing nothing during a ritual might really offend a god. Unless you're at a fertility festival, in which case As you walk home, the sun climbs higher, and your linen becomes an oppressive cling wrap of sweat. You long for a breeze, a bath, or a spell to turn yourself into a falcon and fly somewhere cooler. But all you can do is lift the hem and fan yourself like an irritated royal. You spot an elderly woman outside her home, scrubbing her robe with natron. She glances at you and nods approvingly. You glance down. Somehow your tunic has avoided a dust stain. Miracles do happen. You arrive home, tuck your head wrap on the peg, and sit in the shade. You untie your belt, stretch your legs, and watch as your children chase each other wearing mismatched robes and a necklace made from date pits. Their laughter echoes through the courtyard. Fashion here isn't about luxury. It's about practicality, identity, and divine order. It's armor against the sun, a badge of your role in society, and a statement to the gods that you care about how you present yourself, even when you're covered in goat hair and barley crumbs. You close your eyes and lean back. Tomorrow, maybe you'll wash your tunic. Maybe. Your back hurts, your head is pounding, and you're fairly certain your left foot is either deeply bruised or actively rebelling against you. Naturally, it's time to consider your options for medical care. Unfortunately, in ancient Egypt, those options are complicated, and often smell like fermented disappointment mixed with goat droppings. You limp over to your mat and lower yourself down with a groan that sounds suspiciously like a cursed tomb door creaking open. The ache in your skull pulses like a war drum. You close your eyes and think, maybe it's just dehydration, or maybe it's the spirits. You never really know in Egypt. Could be a demon, could be too much sun, could be that spoilt fish you ate 3 days ago. Here's the thing. Medicine here is a strange blend of the remarkably advanced and the deeply absurd. You've seen your neighbour apply honey to a wound. Smart, since honey has antimicrobial properties. But you've also seen a priest chant for 30 minutes over someone's infected toenail while swinging incense and whispering at the sky. Spoiler, the toe didn't make it. Eventually you hobble to the local healer. She's old, ancient really, and smells like dried mint and clay. Her house is a labyrinth of pots, dried herbs, painted scrolls, and what looks suspiciously like a mummified frog nailed to the wall. You nod politely and explain your headache. She narrows her eyes, places her palm on your forehead, and mutters something about the winds of Sekhmet. That's not good. Sekhmet is the lion-headed goddess of war and healing, which means you might get better, or you might spontaneously combust. 50. She reaches into a cracked basket and pulls out her remedy. A paste made of crushed garlic, mouldy bread, donkey fat, and what she calls blessed dust. You don't ask. She smears it on your temples, mutters a prayer, then blows into your face. It doesn't work. In fact, your headache is now joined by a vague feeling of shame and a powerful garlic aura that follows you home like a judgmental spirit. Welcome to Egyptian medicine, where science and sorcery hold hands and hope for the best. To be fair, there are some genuinely brilliant practices. Egyptian doctors understood basic surgery, bone setting, and wound care. They had medical texts, real papyrus manuals like the Ebers and Edwin Smith papyri, filled with observations and prescriptions. Some treatments even resemble modern ones. But there's also the crocodile dung. Yes, crocodile dung, used in various ways. As a contraceptive, more on that later, an anti-flector, and possibly to chase off any nearby suitors who had functioning noses. Some scholars think it was chosen for its texture and staying power. Others think it was symbolic, tied to the god Sobek. Either way, it's not something you want anywhere near your body. You once heard a story about a man with an eye infection. The healer prescribed crushed green eye paint mixed with beer foam and goat bile. After 3 days, the man claimed he could see the gods. It's unclear whether that means it worked or if he just went blind and delirious. One of your cousins recently got a tooth pulled. The process? Tie a string to the tooth, the other end to a door, and then distract him with a prayer while someone slams the door shut. There was blood, there was screaming, and then a ceremony afterward to bury the tooth properly, because obviously if you anger the spirit of the tooth it might come back and haunt your jaw. You're not making this up. Ancient Egyptians believed that body parts, even hair and fingernail clippings, retained magical energy and had to be treated with ritual care. Lose a tooth? That's a potential portal for evil spirits. Cut your hair? Better bury it under moonlight while chanting, and heaven forbid you sneeze during a ceremony. That could curse the entire... Still, you do what you must. Your neighbour's mother gives you a small amulet carved from green stone, shaped like an eye. It protects against pain, she says, and gossip. You hang it around your neck. It feels strangely comforting. Later that afternoon, you visit the Temple of Thoth. The scribes there are said to know healing spells. One scribe offers to write your name on a slip of papyrus, fold it 13 times and bury it in sand under a sycamore tree. The pain will pass, he promises, or you'll forget about it. Either way, problem solved. It's not all bizarre though. Egyptians pioneered medical practices we still use today. They set bones using splints, they stitched wounds with linen thread, they used willow bark for pain, something we now know contains silicic acid, the basis of aspirin. Even the concept of diagnosis existed. And did your cow give birth near a black cat? You lie down again, head wrapped in a cold cloth soaked in vinegar and chamomile, your makeshift eye amulet balanced on your chest. Your spouse hovers nearby, holding a cup of barley beer and muttering, "You just need to sweat it out." This is also common wisdom. Sweating, purging, and bleeding were all considered ways to restore balance. You once saw a man with a cough being treated with leeches. You also saw that man run screaming into the river 2 days later. So maybe not a ringing endorsement. Children, by the way, are treated with slightly more tenderness. If a baby gets sick, parents might hang protective charms over their crib, tiny statues of Bear, the dwarf god who scares away evil. They might rub herbal paste on the baby's feet or whisper lullabies that double as anti-demon spells. You once sang one without realizing it was a curse against fever. The baby slept great. Back at the healer's hut, the old woman recommends a final remedy. Sleep under the moon, with a bowl of milk near your head to absorb bad dreams. You follow through because why not? Ancient medicine is at least half vibes. That night you sleep lightly, half dreaming of crocodiles in aprons, arguing over how much dung is too much in a salve. When you wake, your headache is gone. Miraculously, or maybe not so miraculous. Maybe it was just rest, or hydration, or your body doing what it does best, healing despite the circumstances. Either way, you rise, stretch, and reach for a cup of water. Your foot still aches, your back still protests, but your head is clear. For now. The sun is already hovering like a grumpy overseer when you step outside, and the air has that familiar, oppressive weight to it, the kind that says, "Oh, you thought today would be easy." Spoiler, it won't be. You gather your tools, a wooden hoe with a cracked handle, a basket with a loose weave, and a length of coarse rope that you've tied and retied so many times, Still, you have no choice but to get moving. Today, you're off to help at the construction site. Word came down from the scribe's office last week. Your family has been assigned 2 weeks of state labour. It's a corvée rotation. You arrive at the site after a long trudge across hard-packed earth and loose sand, where the heat reflects off stone like it has a personal grudge. The foreman, a man with the voice of a vulture and the patience of a gnat, barks orders from beneath the only shaded awning in sight. You and the other workers gather your tools and form a line, like ants preparing to rebuild the pyramid from scratch. Your task today? Worry duty. Lucky you. You join a line of men hauling massive stone blocks across wooden sledges, each one greased with water and animal fat to reduce friction. Sort of. Mostly, it still feels like dragging a mountain across gravel with nothing but hope and splinters. You dig your heels into the ground, grunt, push, and try to ignore the fact that your spine is beginning to hum like a lyre string about to snap. One guy behind you starts singing an old folk tune about a boy who got out of work by pretending to be a ghost. Everyone laughs, but no one stops pulling. That's the rule. You joke, you sweat, you suffer, but you do not stop. Labour in Egypt is relentless. Whether you're a field hand, a fisherman, a potter, or, in your case today, a human mule, there's no such thing as a day off. Holidays exist, sure, but they're mostly for the elite or tied to religious festivals where you might still end up working, just in fancy clothes while being blessed by someone in eyeliner. There are no unions, no contracts, No HR department to report to when someone steals your lunch fig. You work from sunrise to sunset, and if you're lucky you might get a beer ration and a crust of bread that hasn't been pre-chewed by weevils. That said, not everything is terrible. There's camaraderie among the workers. You share jokes, help each other lift the heavier loads, and occasionally swap stories about that one guy who claims to have seen the gods during a sandstorm. There's even a guy named Teppy who swears he can smell treasure under the ground. No one believes him, but it's a great way to kill time during breaks. Which, by the way, you get one of. Maybe. Today your break is a short half hour under a palm frond shade that looks like it's moments from falling apart. You sit on a rock, sip warm beer from a gourd, and try not to notice the blister forming on your left palm. You share a dried fish with a guy named Hooney, who has the face of someone who's made peace with the idea of dying mid-lift. He nods at your hands and says, "You should chew lotus root, helps with the pain." You try it. It tastes like sadness. Still, you chew. The overseer strolls past, carrying a scroll and looking entirely too smug. You suspect he's never worked a day in his life. He's the type to complain about his ink being too thick, while you're out here losing toenails in the name of national infrastructure. Some scribes have documented labour strikes, yes, actual strikes in ancient Egypt. One famous one happened at Deir el-Medina, a village of artisans who worked on royal tombs. When their wages, in the form of food and supplies, were delayed, they refused to work, just laid down their tools and sat in protest. It's one of the earliest recorded labour disputes in history. But for you, you're not an artisan. You're not skilled enough to carve fine tomb walls or paint delicate lotus flowers. You're the muscle, the foot soldier of stone. No one's going to write about you in a scroll, unless it's to say you dropped a block and chipped a corner. So you work. You haul more stones. You shovel gravel into baskets and dump it down narrow trenches. You help build a ramp that leads nowhere. You watch a man pass out from heat, get dragged to the shade, splashed with water, and then dragged right back to the line. Some days you wish you could be a temple musician. They get to sing, play instruments, and shake sistrums in honor of the gods. No heavy lifting required, just melody, rhythm, and memorized hymns. But musical training starts young, and you were too busy learning how to plough a field without crying. By mid-afternoon, your tunic is soaked through, your legs wobble, and you swear your shadow is starting to look judgmental. You wipe your face with a corner of cloth that's more salt than linen, and force down another swallow of beer. It's warm, it's flat, it tastes like fermented barley sadness, but it's calories, and you need every drop. Later, you're asked to carry tools back to the foreman's hut. It's the closest thing to a reward you'll get today. You do it quickly, quietly, hoping he won't find another task to throw at you before sundown. You pass by a row of clay bricks drying in the sun, each one stamped with a royal seal. The pharaoh's name carved neatly into the centre of every brick, because even your sweat must serve someone's legacy. You think about that, about how everything you build today will be remembered under someone else's name. You wonder if the gods notice that part. The sun begins to set, casting long golden shadows over the half-finished walls. The foreman calls an end to the day with a voice like gravel. You drop your tools, rub your back, and breathe a sigh that feels like it's been waiting all day to escape. You walk home in silence, with others who are just as sore, just as dusty, just as exhausted. A few of them hum songs. One is already talking about tomorrow's load. Someone else jokes that maybe in the next life, they'll be reborn as a sacred cat. You laugh. You hope so. At home, your family welcomes you with the same dusty embrace. There's bread, there's beer, there's a little leftover fig mash if the kids didn't eat it all. You eat slowly, carefully. Each bite tastes like earned rest. You lie down on your mat, staring at the ceiling. Your muscles twitch. Your mind drifts. Work in Egypt isn't just labour. It's existence. It's identity, it's devotion. But tonight, you're not a labourer. You're just tired. And you're grateful. You wake up to the sound of drums. Not the fun dance around a fire kind of drums. These are the heavy, echoing kind that say, "Time to honour the gods, or else." You blink, yawn, and immediately regret opening your eyes. The sunlight is slicing through the doorway like a judgmental spear. Your body aches from yesterday's work, and your legs scream as you push yourself upright. But you don't even consider skipping the ceremony today, not even for a second, because in ancient Egypt, religion isn't something you do when you feel like it. It's your job, your duty, your survival strategy, your daily cosmic performance for a divine audience that's always watching, and occasionally smiting. You shuffle outside, dust clinging to your tunic, hair sticking up in every direction, and your eyeliner still smudged from yesterday. A neighbour catches your eye and gestures for you to hurry. Apparently today is a feast day for Hathor, goddess of love, joy, beauty, and drunkenness. That last one tends to bring out the crowds. The village square is already buzzing. Banners of linen flap gently from reed poles. Clay jars of beer line the temple steps. There's incense in the air, a heavy mix of myrrh, resin, and something suspiciously like goat. Musicians tune their lyres and strike sistrums that rattle like bones in a tomb. You find your spot in the crowd, surrounded by neighbours and cousins, and a man who smells like he hasn't left the beer tent since last feast day. The priests arrive in shimmering white linen, their shavered heads gleaming, their movements slow and practiced. They carry statues of the goddess, decorated in gold leaf and adorned with lotus flowers. The chanting begins, deep and rhythmic, and you try your best to follow. You know most of the words, but it's early and your stomach is still waiting for bread. The priest raises his hands and the crowd responds in unison, palms upward, heads bowed. It's not just a prayer, it's a performance. The gods expect flair. In Egypt, religion isn't a private affair. It's public, collective, and constant. There are over 2,000 gods, and every one of them wants something. Daily offerings, incense, chants, little statues, ritual baths, symbolic sacrifices, ceremonial dances. Even the shape of your eyeliner can be a form of devotion if it's modelled after the eye of Horus. And these gods? They're not like the distant, untouchable types you hear about in some cultures. Egyptian gods live in your house. They walk your streets. They're in your dreams, your bread, your nightmares. Bastet might be lounging in your kitchen as a cat. Thoth might be watching your spelling mistakes. And don't even get started on Sekeme for partying too hard without permission. Historians still debate whether that myth was meant to teach moderation or just scare children into better party etiquette. After the ceremony, you join the procession. Everyone marches together to the riverbank, led by the priests. The statue of Hathor is carried on a portable shrine, veiled in silk, accompanied by chants and flute music. It's beautiful and heavy. You once helped carry a statue of Osiris. 13 people were needed, and one guy sprained his ankle because he tripped on his own sandal. You reach the river and watch as the statue is set on a ceremonial boat, an elegant craft shaped like a papyrus bloom. This is a sacred moment. The goddess is symbolically sailing through the underworld, battling chaos and blessing the Nile. You wipe sweat from your brow and wonder if Hathor ever gets seasick. After the procession, the real festival begins. Food, beer, music, dancing. And yes, religion is still in every bit of it. That fish stew, blessed by a priest. That beer, brewed in honour of Teneta, goddess of childbirth and fermentation. Even the dancing, wild and unrestrained, is said to please Hathor. Of course, if you get too wild, the priests might chase you off with a broom. You've seen it happen. Back at home, you prepare your own offering. A bowl of lentils, a few figs, and a pinch of natron. You place it in the family shrine, beneath a crude statue of Isis, with a chipped nose and a smile that feels vaguely condescending. You light a cone of incense and whisper a quick prayer. Please protect the house. Also, fewer rats this month would be great. You've seen what happens when people neglect their shrines. One neighbour skipped daily offerings for a week and then got a scorpion in her bed. Coincidence? Maybe. But she's now the most devout person on the street. Some people go even deeper. There are private rituals, household gods and fertility spells. Some women wear amulets shaped like frogs or hippos, symbols of birth and protection. One guy you know swears by a love spell involving rose petals and sand from a tomb. You think it's creepy. Also, his wife left him. So, maybe not that effective. You rest in the shade during the heat of the afternoon. The streets are quieter now, the festival's slowing down, people napping with full bellies and fuzzy heads. You stare at the sky and think about Mamet, the concept of order, balance, truth. It governs everything: life, death, the sun's path, even your posture during prayer. Your heart, you've been told, will one day be weighed against a feather. If it's too heavy, with lies, misdeeds, forgotten offerings, it'll be eaten by a crocodile, lion, hippo monster named Ammit. Yes, really, your soul's eternal fate may hinge on how rude you were to your neighbour during last week's goat dispute. It's enough to make you say please and thank you a lot. As evening falls, you join your family for the final part of the ritual. Wrestle one of the great myths. Tonight, it's the story of Osiris, how he was betrayed, dismembered, and reassembled by his wife Isis, who used magic and devotion to bring him back. It's tragic, powerful, and just a little too gory for bedtime. But no one minds. The kids listen wide-eyed. Even the chickens seem quietly respectful. After the story, you light another lamp and whisper a blessing for the house. Peace, protection, and no scorpions. Religion touches every moment, from your birth, welcomed with chants and charms, to your death, when priests wrap your body, paint your eyelids, and speak your name so your soul won't be forgotten. It's exhausting sometimes, trying to remember which god to pray to for which problem. Is it Thoth for learning, Sekhmet for health, Taweret for childbirth, or just throw? You lie down, the smell of incense lingering in your clothes. The drums have stopped, the sky is dark, and somewhere, in some distant temple, a priest is still chanting. Because the gods never sleep. And neither, it seems, do you. You've just sat down to eat a small breakfast of dried bread and last night's mashed lentils when you hear it again. The scratchy voice of your neighbour yelling at his son to hurry up, be late for the house of life. Not the afterlife. The school. You glance up from your bowl and see the boy dragging his feet, his reed pens dangling from a threadbare pouch slung over his shoulder. His eyes are puffy, and his tunic is still inside out. You give him a sympathetic nod. Everyone in the village knows that being chosen for scribe training is both a blessing and a curse. Because scribes in ancient Egypt, they are elite, respected, feared, and, let's be honest, just a little bit smug. You remember the first time you saw a real scribe up close. He had smooth skin, sharp eyes, and a posture that practically screamed, "I don't lift anything heavier than a pen." He sat under a shady awning while 20 men hauled bricks past him, recording every movement with a flick of his reed pen and a sneer that could slice granite. Becoming a scribe is the dream, if you have the brain power and the pain tolerance. You wander past the village school on your way to the fields and pause near the open window, pretending to adjust your belt while eavesdropping. Inside, 10 boys sit hunched over wooden boards covered in red and black ink. The teacher, a stern man with the temperament of a thunderstorm, paces between them with a thin stick in hand. Not just for pointing. No, that stick gets real personal real fast if someone miswrites the word for cattle, or smudges their ink again. School in Egypt isn't for the faint-hearted. It begins early. Students as young as 5 start their training and continues for years. Reading, writing, copying endless religious texts, memorizing proverb, practicing how to write the same word 50 times in the same size and angle. If your hand shakes, that's a do-over. If you complain, you're introduced to the teacher's stick, affectionately called the persuader. Still, the benefits? Oh, they're enormous. Scribes don't work in the fields, they don't build pyramids, they don't carry water jars until their arms fall off. They sit in shaded rooms and record things. Grain amounts, temple donations, court decisions, land ownership, tax records, military orders, even love letters. If words are power, then scribes are the quiet rulers behind the throne. You heard once that a clever scribe forged a document to make it look like his uncle had given him land. The family argued for weeks, but no one could read, and the scroll had the official seal. Scholars still debate how much creative accounting went unnoticed by the illiterate masses. The consensus? Probably a lot. Back at the school, the teacher recites one of the classic proverbs, written on every classroom wall. The scribe's hand is better than the labourer's back. A boy in the front whispers something sarcastic. The stick answers immediately. You wince in sympathy. Ink is made from soot, gum and water, mixed into black or red depending on what you're writing. Black is for normal text, red is for timeout corrections or things that need shouting, like "do not anger Seppa." The pens are thin reeds sharpened to a fine point. Paper? Papyrus. Thin sheets made from the reed that grows along the Nile. Durable, lightweight, and absurdly expensive if you ruin one. You head to the market, and as you walk, you pass the scribble office, the small but important building where records are stored. You peek through the open door. Inside, 2 scribes sit cross-legged, sorting scrolls. One of them is yawning. The other is carefully using a flat stone to press a sheet of papyrus smooth. You can tell who they are from a distance. Their tunics are brighter, their fingers are stained with ink, and their sandals are whole. Intact sandals are a whole move in this town. They barely glance at you as you pass. To them, you're just another number in a grain list. Another unskilled labourer with nothing but sweat and dust to show for your day. Still, you can't help but envy them a little. There's an old saying, "A scribe does not sweat." That's not entirely true, but it's close. You drop off your errands and decide to stop by your cousin's house. He trained as a scribe, but left the post because of philosophical differences. Translation, he couldn't handle the constant correction and missed working with his hands. He now carves names into tomb walls. Still a written trade, but one that lets him work outside and occasionally flirt with girls walking by. He shows you a mistake he made earlier. He accidentally drew a bird symbol facing the wrong direction. Now it says, "The blessed goose eats the king." You both laugh for a solid minute. Later you visit the temple, where a high-ranking priest is dictating a scroll to a scribe. You watch from a respectful distance. The scribe never looks up, never flinches, just writes, line after line, fluid and perfect. It's like watching someone paint a picture with language. You've heard that some of these elite scribes could write without even thinking, whole hymns, laws, stories, just flowing through their hands like magic. Some scholars believe scribes held a sacred connection to Thoth, the god of wisdom and writing. It makes sense. When you control the words, you control the world. As the sun dips lower, you pass the school again. The students are filing out, blinking into the light like stunned lizards. One boy has ink on his cheek. Another is muttering the same sentence over and over under his breath. Do not anger the grain counter. Do not anger the grain counter. You walk beside one for a moment. "Ta-day," you ask. He nods and says, "I got 7 strokes for spelling crocodile like cucumber." Then, after a pause, you grin and clap him on the shoulder. When you get home, you think about what it would have been like, learning to write, sitting under a shade with scrolls in your lap instead of a hoe in your hands. But then, you look at your cool's fingers, your dusty feet, and your sunburnt nose and think, maybe there's honour in sweat too. Still, when your child asks you what the bird with the stick means in a scroll, you smile and say, "It means scroobs have soft hands." They believe you. For now. Today is market day. Unlike most market days in ancient Egypt, it promises equal parts excitement, chaos, and the sneaking suspicion that someone's trying to trade you a dried fig for your best jar. You rise early, slipping into your cleanest linen tunic, not saying much, since it's still frayed at the hem and smells faintly of garlic, and gather your goods. A handful of onions, a few loaves of bread, and 1 jar of barely drinkable beer. You tie it all up in a reed basket, sling it over your shoulder, and set off down the dusty street toward the heart of the village, hoping for good trades and fewer lies than last time. The air is already thick with heat, and you can hear the market long before you see it. The clash of voices bartering, the clatter of pottery, and the squawk of a very upset goose, probably being sold to someone who has no idea how to hold a goose. You pass neighbours on the way, all loaded down with goods. Woven mats, clay pots, clined fish, a toddler or two clinging to their legs like extra baggage. You step into the market square and the atmosphere hits you like a wave. Bright fabrics stretch across stalls to shade their owners. Spices dance in the air. Cumin, coriander, a whiff of something so strong it might be ancient garlic reincarnated. Merchants shout about their wares. Sweetest figs in the kingdom. Papyrus scrolls, cheap today. You find a corner and lay out your offerings. You've got a spot next to a potter who's already sweating through his robe and fanning flies away from his unglazed wares. On the other side, a girl is selling small wooden dolls painted with crude but charming faces. Her sales pitch? They ward off scorpions. Honestly, they probably do, by frightening them. Bartering begins almost immediately. A woman eyes your bread skeptically. "This one's stale," she says. "It's dense," you reply, "full of wisdom." She squints. "It's full of weevils." You shrug. "Extra protein." She laughs and trades you a bundle of leeks anyway. And that's the beauty of the market. No coins, no calculators, just goods for goods, sometimes services for favours, and always, a little exaggeration. Currency in your time doesn't really exist the way modern folks imagine. Instead, everything has value based on its usefulness, rarity, or sometimes just how desperate someone looks when they need it. You trade a jar of beer for a length of thread, the thread for a small clay figurine, the figurine for a handful of dried dates. By midday, you've basically come full circle, ending up with slightly different versions of what you started with, and a vague feeling of accomplishment. Of course, not everything is smooth sailing. As you turn to adjust your basket, you notice a boy, maybe 10, maybe 12, lingering a little too close. He's staring at your last loaf of bread. You raise an eyebrow. He doesn't move. You look down again and you glance up. He's gone too. Class. Theft in ancient Egypt isn't uncommon, especially in crowded places like the market. And while small-time bread snatchers are tolerated, to an extent, more serious thefts can bring harsh punishment. Some local judges issue beatings, others require restitution, and in extreme cases, the punishment might involve the removal of a hand. Scholars debate how often this actually happened versus how much was just threatened to scare would-be thieves. Either way, your bread is gone, and you're too tired to chase anyone. You sigh, pick up your basket, and move on. Elsewhere in the square, a man is loudly proclaiming he has a scarab amulet that once belonged to a prince. You squint at it. It's made of baked mud, badly painted, and has a chip in the corner that looks suspiciously like a dog bite. Still, 3 people are already bidding on it with handfuls of lentils. Behind you, a woman is haggling over a jug of oil. You said it was sesame. It's mostly sesame. What's the rest? A little flax and, carrot. You try not to laugh. You've had worse oil. Near the centre of the square, temple officials are collecting offerings for the gods. A large, robed priest holds a basket, shaking it with a rhythmic clank. "Offer what you can," he says. "The gods are watching." They probably are, but today the gods might have to wait. Your own stomach is watching you harder. You find a woman selling small meat pies, and trade the last of your herbs for one. You take a bite and chew slowly. It's warm, flaky, and deeply suspicious. You don't ask what meat it is. You just hope it's not pigeon again. Or worse, pigeon adjacent. Later you walk past a storyteller. He's seated on a low stool, children gathered around him, spinning a tale about a talking crocodile who saves a farmer's wife from a jealous priest. The moral is unclear, but the kids are laughing, and one of them offers the storyteller a piece of melon as payment. Barter. Once again. You pass a musician strumming a lute, a woman selling incense cones shaped like tiny pyramids, and a scribe with a small table offering to write love poems for a fee. You consider asking for one, just to see what he'd come up with. But then you remember that time your name was spelt wrong on a festival scroll, and decide against it. You stop by a weaver's stall to admire a cloth dyed a rich ochre red. The weaver nods at your interest. "For your wife?" You grin. "For myself. Thinking of starting a new trend." He laughs and offers a discount. You politely decline. You're still recovering from that pigeon pie. As the sun drops lower in the sky, the market begins to wind down. Merchants pack up their wares, children help gather baskets, the storyteller stands and stretches. You do one last loop, looking for anything useful or interesting you might have missed. You find a small amulet carved from green faience, shaped like a cat. The merchant sees you eyeing it. "Protection," he says. "Keep spirits away." You raise an eyebrow. "Also rats." "Sold." You trade your last onion for it and head home with your basket, only slightly lighter, and your heart slightly lighter too. Markets aren't just about goods. They're about stories, people, ritual, the chance to barter not just for things, but for connection. You go home a little poorer, a little more tired, and a little more full of questionable meat pie. Because in ancient Egypt, the market is where the village breathes, where gossip is currency, where bread can vanish in an instant, and where even a chip clay cat might just keep the spirit and the rats at bay. The sun is finally down, but that doesn't mean the day is over. In fact, in ancient Egyptian, night is just a different kind of busy, just in time, darker, yes, but definitely not peaceful. Not really. Because when the light goes out, the imagination lights up. And ancient Egyptians, they had very vivid imaginations. You're home again, sitting by a small oil lamp that sputters gently as it burns. The flame flickers against the mud brick walls, casting lopsided shadows that somehow always manage to look vaguely menacing, like a cat that's seen too much, or a ghost with a sense of humour. The lamp smells faintly of old sesame and hope. It's just bright enough to see your bowl of lentils, but not bright enough to make you feel safe from the lurking mysteries outside. Your neighbour's door creaks, a dog barks, a distant flute plays somewhere near the river, and you wonder, briefly, if it's a real musician or something else. You settle onto your mat, trying to relax, but night in ancient Egypt is a whole different vibe. By day you have the sun god Ra riding his glorious solar boat across the sky, keeping everything warm and orderly. But by night, Ra descends into the underworld, have a matter-filled a chaos serpent named Apophis, who literally exists just to eat souls and ruin everything. And if Ra doesn't win, no sunrise, no warmth, just eternal cosmic darkness. So yeah, no pressure. Naturally, this nightly apocalypse doesn't exactly encourage restful sleep. The ancient Egyptians saw night as a time of risk, a liminal period when spirits roamed freely, protective boundaries weakened, and everything from demons to disease might slip in through a poorly sealed door. This is why people go to extreme lengths to protect themselves while they sleep. You, for example, have an amulet hanging above your headrest. It's shaped like the Eye of Horus and painted with faint blue lines. Supposedly, it wards off the things that whisper. You're not entirely sure what those things are, and frankly, you don't want to be. There's also a bowl of milk at the foot of your mat, left out for Bay, the dwarf god of households, who's said to patrol the house after dark, sword in hand, tongue out, ready to fight nightmares and the occasional ghost with boundary issues. He's ugly, loud, and weirdly comforting. Begins basically the ancient Egyptian version of a security system with a sense of humour. And let's not forget the magical spells. You whisper one under your breath now, something your grandmother taught you. Oh, spirits of the west, stay west. Oh, creeping things, stay low. Oh, whisperers, take your nonsense elsewhere. It sounds silly, but tonight, like every night, you say it anyway. Outside, the streets are mostly empty. Not because people aren't awake, some are, but because it's just not safe. Thieves, jackals, and the occasional slightly dew-drunk priest all lurk in the shadows. Temples remain lit, their sacred flames watched by night acolytes who chant through the darkest hours. But ordinary homes? Locked, bolted, sealed with spit and prayer. You remember the story of a neighbour who left her door open one night. Just one night. She swore something brushed past her bed. Something cold. Something that smelled like wet linen and old papyrus. In the morning, her cat was gone. So was her sense of humour. Cats, by the way, are sacred and also considered spiritual guardians. Your own cat, Pamiyu, is currently perched on a ledge, eyes wide, staring at absolutely nothing, which is far worse than if he were asleep. The ancient Egyptians believed cats could see into the unseen, so when yours starts growling at a spot on the wall, you don't ask questions, you just move your mat to the other side of the room. Still, the night isn't all terror and tiptoeing. There's also beauty. You step outside for a moment, just long enough to breathe in the cool air. The sky is enormous, scattered with stars that feel almost touchable in the dry, clear night. You spot the familiar constellations, the giant bull, the seated god, the river of stars. You whisper a thank you to Nut, the sky goddess, whose great body arches over the world each night, swallowing the sun and birthing it again every dawn. Some say the stars are her children. Some say their eyes. You try not to think about being watched. Back inside, you hear the soft hum of your spouse's voice, singing a lullaby to the youngest child. It's an old tune, one that speaks of warm sands, sweet figs, and the promise that if the child sleeps, they will wake. That part's important, because sleep isn't just rest. It's a little death, a miniature journey into the unknown. And dreams? Dreams are messages, warnings, prophecies. You had one last week where you were standing in a field of blue lotuses, and a baboon with your grandmother's face told you to avoid the colour green. You haven't worn green since. Not because you're superstitious, of course. Just dream interpretation is a whole profession in Egypt. There are scrolls filled with meanings. Dream about drinking beer? Good luck. Dream about losing teeth? Bad omen. Dream about flying? Depends who's watching. And if your dreams are too intense, there are remedies. You can sleep on a different side of the bed. You can anoint your forehead with oil. You can visit a temple and ask for a priest to perform a ritual that involves chanting, incense, and possibly smearing honey on your ears. Don't ask. It works. Maybe. Tonight, though, your only ritual is curling up under your linen cloth, listening to the distant howls from the desert, and hoping that neither jackals nor spirits feel particularly adventurous. You hear something creak, just the house settling. You hear a soft hiss, probably Pamiyu. You hear a knock. Note. No, you didn't. You hold your breath. Nothing. Then a fart from your eldest child rolls through the room like a tiny desert wind. You exhale. Night in Egypt is a test of courage, of faith, of whether or not your little brother will sleep talk again about that time he saw a crocodile in the well. You pull the cloth tighter around your shoulders and stare at the ceiling. The shadows have shifted. Your eyes are heavy. Outside, the stars still burn. Somewhere, Ray is deep in his battle with Apophis. And you, mourning light to return. Because in Egypt, the sun always comes back. But only if the gods win tonight. The rooster crowing at dawn is your not-so-subtle reminder that you're still alive and still married. As you sit up on your mat, limbs stiff and hair doing its own rendition of a pyramid collapse, your spouse is already up and working, humming softly while arranging bread loaves on a reed tray. You grunt something halfway between good morning and, is it worth continuing? They respond with a smirk. Marriage in ancient Egypt is, well, not exactly what the modern mind imagines. There are no big weddings, no glittering rings, and definitely no bridal showers where people gift each other bronze cheese slices. There's just an agreement, often unspoken, sometimes documented, that two people are going to live together, run a household, raise some kids, and maybe not kill each other over who forgot to close the grain jar. You glance at your spouse, who's now arguing with a goose that refuses to leave the bread alone, and you think, yes, this is love. Or at the very least, committed cohabitation with shared poultry threats. Marriages are usually arranged informally. If you want to be fancy, there might be a marriage contract, often outlining what happens in case of separation. Because yes, divorce is a thing, and surprisingly progressive too. Women can initiate it, they can own property, inherit goods, and keep custody of children. In fact, some historians argue that women in Egypt had more legal rights than women in many later civilizations. But still, Blah, that's complicated. Some couples genuinely love each other. You've seen it. Elderly couples walking hand in hand along the Nile, whispering jokes, still swatting each other with reeds after all these years. Others are clearly together for survival, convenience, or because their fathers traded goats 15 years ago and that was that. And then there are affairs. Plenty of those. Even though the culture praises fidelity, especially for women, everyone knows that fishermen sometimes miss fish farther downstream. There's even a myth about the god Amun disguising himself to seduce a woman, which was probably the original "it wasn't me" excuse. Your neighbour, Nafi, likes to gossip about who's sneaking into whose garden at dusk. Her current theory is that the potter's wife is spending too much time admiring the scribe's handwriting. You didn't ask for details. You also now can't look at a papyrus scroll without blushing. Despite all this, monogamy is the cultural ideal, especially among commoners. Pharaohs and elites? Different story. They can have multiple wives, concubines, and a confusing web of royal offspring that no one wants to sort through. You heard that one pharaoh married his own sister, twice, because why stop at one family reunion? You're snapped out of your musing by the sound of a scream, sharp, high-pitched and terrifying. You jump to your feet, ready to grab a stick or a god to defend yourself. But then you realize it's not a scream of terror. It's childbirth. Your neighbour's wife is in labour. You rush over with your spouse, following the sound into the modest home where a group of women are already gathered. The air is thick with sweat, incense, and the low murmurs of prayer. In the centre of the room, the expectant mother is crouched on a birthing stool, gripping the sides like they owe her money. Her face is red, her hair plastered to her forehead, her breath coming in short bursts. The midwife, a small, sturdy woman with the focus of a priest and the attitude of a drunk lioness, barks orders at everyone. Water, towels, herbs, quiet. She's done this before and everyone knows to stay out of her way. Childbirth in ancient Egypt is a community event, but not a public one. Women attend to women. Men are nowhere in sight unless they're fetching something, praying to Taweret, or fainting nearby. You slip to the side of the room, offering a bowl of cool water. The midwife nods, and for a moment you feel useful. Then the labouring woman lets out another groan, and you immediately question every life choice that brought you here. Birthing stools are common. They let gravity help, which everyone agrees is the least the universe can offer during this ordeal. The stool has a hole in the centre with a pot underneath to catch whatever falls. And yes, there's usually a small statue of a goddess, maybe Hathor or Isis, nearby for spiritual support. Think of it like a divine doula. The midwife rubs a paste of date syrup and herbs on the woman's lower back. It smells oddly pleasant. You've heard of stranger treatments, like chanting into a jar and holding it near the belly, or drawing protective symbols on the floor. Some scrolls even recommend using crocodile fat for easing labour pain. You're not sure how, and you never want to find out. After hours of tense silence, shouted encouragement, and more than one screamed curse against all gods and men alike, the room is suddenly filled with the sharp, gasping cry of a newborn. The women erupt into movement. Towels, water, smiles. Relief. You watch as the baby, a tiny, squirming bundle, is lifted and examined. Fingers, toes, eyes, all there. Still wet, still red, but healthy. The midwife wraps the baby in linen and hands it to the exhausted mother, who collapses back into the arms of her sister with a laugh that sounds like it was pulled from the depths of every previous life. You exhale. Only now do you realize how long you were holding your breath. Birth is dangerous. For the mother, for the child. Ancient Egyptians knew this well. Mortality rates were high, and every successful birth was a miracle wrapped in sweat and blood and whispered prayers. That's why childbirth goddesses like Taweret, a pregnant hippo with the face of a crocodile, are so beloved. They're weird, wild and terrifying, but they show up when it counts. You return home with your spouse, both of you quiet, thoughtful. The stars are already poking through the sky, and the air has cooled just enough to let your brain catch up. That night, you light a small lamp and place it at the foot of your mat. For health? For safety? or whatever unseen things might be watching. You curl beside your spouse, grateful for their steady breath, their warm hand resting near yours. You don't say anything. You don't need to. Marriage in ancient Egypt isn't always easy, but it's real. It's shared. It's survival and ritual and routine and laughter and 1,000 tiny acts of kindness repeated across lifetimes. Tomorrow, you'll argue about something small, like whether the bread is too salty. Tonight, you rest. Together. You wake up to the sound of a funeral drum echoing faintly through the village. It's slow and rhythmic. Boom, boom, boom. And you know immediately what it means. Someone has died. Again, you sit up slowly, rubbing the sleep from your eyes. The room is quiet, save for the soft shuffling of your spouse laying out the day's bread. You exchange a glance. No words needed. Everyone knows what comes next. In Egypt, death is never far away, and when it arrives it comes wrapped in ritual, covered in linen and followed by a long dusty line of mourning. You step outside, shielding your eyes from the early sun. The air is heavy with incense and expectation. The house of the deceased is already surrounded by neighbours, extended family, and 1 or 2 curious children who clearly just want to see if the body looks funny. You find out who it was? Many. The old man who used to sell dates near the river. Not young, not wealthy, but kind. Always had an extra fig for your kids, and a sarcastic joke about the price of fish. Now, he's gone, and the village moves like a machine, everyone knowing their part in the great production of sending a soul to the afterlife. Because death in ancient Egypt isn't an end. It's an appointment. And it comes with a lot of paperwork. Okay, not literal paperwork, but rituals, spells, taxes, fees, and a social obligation list longer than a crocodile's tail. First, the body is washed. You're not close enough to help, but you know the steps. The family strips the body of its clothes, anoints it with sacred oils, and begins the first round of prayers. The body is then handed over to the wetuyu, the embalming priests, if the family can afford them. And that's the catch. Burials in Egypt are expensive, really expensive, even for the basic package. If you're rich, congratulations, you get the full deluxe service. Professional embalmers, 4 canopic jars for your organs, gold amulets for protection, a painted sarcophagus, a private tomb, and enough funerary goods to open a small convenience store in the afterlife. If you're poor, you get linen strips, a second-hand shroud, and maybe a wooden coffin with your name scratched into it. If your family is lucky, they'll bribe someone to sneak in a prayer or 2 from the Book of the Dead. A massive guidebook filled with spells to help your soul navigate the underworld without getting eaten by a monster or embarrassed by a grammar error in your declaration of innocence. Some scholars argue the Book of the Dead was only for elites. Others say fragments of it trickled down to commoners through oral tradition and cheaper versions. Either way, everyone wants one. No one wants to end up wandering the duat forever because they forgot to say, "I have not stolen bread." As you make your way toward the funeral, you pass the tax collector's assistant. He's going house to house today, reminding everyone that even death doesn't exempt you from taxes. In fact, funerals have their own costs. Temple fees, land use for burial, donations to the embalmers, even the mourning supplies like natron, incense, and linen. It's been said, you arrive at the edge of the procession as it begins. The mourners wear torn clothes, intentionally ripped as a sign of grief. Some smear dust on their heads. Others wail loudly, crying out to Osiris, Anubis, and any deity who might be listening. One professional mourner collapses dramatically, clutching her chest. She's hired, but still. You spot the priest leading the ritual. He wears a jackal mask, representing Anubis, the god of embalming. His voice booms out prayers. He sprinkles natron over the body, wraps the arms in fresh linen, and marks the forehead with ochre. The coffin is simple, wooden, lightly painted, already starting to crack. But Many's name is there, written clearly with a prayer underneath. May your car be fed, and your bar find peace. You watch as the procession moves toward the necropolis just outside the village. The road there is familiar. Everyone walks it eventually. The graves are shallow for the poor, elaborate for the rich. Tombs carved with symbols, stocked with food, shatty figurines, tiny servants meant to work for you in the afterlife. And sometimes, oddly enough, board games. Because who doesn't want to play a little senet while waiting for judgment? In speaking of judgment, everyone knows what comes after burial. The weighing of the heart. You imagine many, now a spirit, standing in the hall of two truths. Before him, the great god Osiris. To the side, Anubis, calm and precise, placing many's heart on the golden scales. On the other side, a single feather. The feather of Mamat, truth, justice, cosmic order. If his heart is light, untainted by lies, cruelty or forgotten offerings, he passes. If not, well, meet Amit. She's part lion, part hippo, part crocodile, and all nightmare. She waits by the scales, licking her chops. One bad judgment, and she eats your soul like it's breakfast. No second chances, no appeals. You think about that as the coffin is lowered. The mourners chant, tossing handfuls of sand, whispering many's name again and again. Because in Egypt, to be remembered is to live. To be forgotten is to vanish. Later you walk back home, quiet. Your own death feels closer now. Not in a morbid way, just present, real. You wonder if your family could afford the canopic jars, if anyone would hire a mourner for you, if your name would be said 100 years from now. You stop by the temple on your way, slip in a single onion as an offering, whisper many's name under your breath, just in case he's still listening. At home, your spouse greets you with a soft look and a cup of beer. Did he have a good send-off? Ha. You nod. He'll be fine, you say. He was kind. His heart won't be heavy. You sit together in the fading light. Tomorrow, you'll go back to work. Today, Hamilman. The night is quiet now, but your mind is anything but. You lie on your mat, wrapped in rough linen, eyes half closed but heart wide awake. The shadows flicker on the walls, and the soft scent of incense lingers, mingling with the cool desert air slipping in through the reed curtains. Somewhere beyond your home, a jackal howls, remind you that the night is alive with mysteries you'd rather not meet face to face. You think about the gods, how they watch everything, always. No moment is private, no thought unseen. Ra, the mighty sun god, sees your every move by day. Osiris judges your soul by night. Thoth records your deeds with unerring precision. And Bear, that odd dwarf god with his tongue out and sword ready, patrols your home where we're ready to kill any. The ancient Egyptians believed the gods were woven into the very fabric of life. Every breath, every heartbeat, every grain of sand carried their presence. They ruled your fate, your fortune, your failures. You lived for their favour and feared their wrath. And tonight, as you drift towards sleep, you wonder, how much of your life was your own? How much was shaped by divine will, ritual, and the ancient laws of Mamat, balance, truth, and cosmic order? You remember the stories you grew up hearing, the weighing of the heart, where your soul is measured against a feather, the journeys through the Duat, the underworld, where dangers lurk at every turn, serpents, demons, and the ever-watchful eyes of Anubis. The hope that, if you've lived rightly, you'll be granted eternal life, joined forever with the gods in the field of reeds. But it's not just after death that the gods watch. Every moment is sacred, every choice weighed. You remember when you were a child, how your mother taught you to offer daily prayers, to light incense, to carry amulets, not because it guaranteed riches or happiness, but because it aligned you with the divine order that kept the world turning. You feel the weight of that now. The same gods who carved the mountains, flooded the Nile, and raised the pyramids are watching you as you lie here, tired, hopeful, human. You think about the times you faltered, the harsh words spoken to your spouse, the day you skipped an offering, the time you told a little lie to keep peace. Did the gods notice? Do they remember? Or are they patient, understanding, watching with a quiet mercy that you sometimes forget to ask for? You think about many, your neighbour whose funeral you attended. His heart will be weighed soon. You hope it is light, but you also hope he finds peace in whatever comes next. Because in Egypt, death is not an end but a passage, a continuation. Your eyes drift closed, but before sleep fully claims you, a soft voice whispers in your mind. Maybe it's Bez. Maybe it's your own heart reminding you of all you've lived through. Be good, it says gently. Be kind. Live with honour, and know that you are seen. You breathe out slowly. The night deepens, the desert cools, the stars burn silently above. And as you slip into sleep, you carry with you the ancient truths. That life is fleeting, that the gods are always watching, and that, somehow, in this vast and mysterious world, you belong. You rest now. Let the memories of dust, sweat, laughter and prayers fade gently into dreams. The world holds its breath with you. The Nile whispers softly. The palm trees sway in the quiet breeze, and the stars keep their watchful vigil. It is okay to let go, to drift, to rest. For tomorrow, the sun will rise again, the gods will speak again, and you will walk forward one step, one breath, one heartbeat at a time. Good night, traveller.